Welcome to Fast Friends, the podcast that centers on high performance storytelling with high performance athletes and individuals whose norm is to live at the very top 0.01%, whether it's competition, coaching, business, or life. We dive into their stories, how they got there, the journey, and life on the other side. I'm your host, Dan Walsh, and I'm joined by my co host, Justin Faber. Justin and I were rowing teammates in college and later on the U.S. national team. Though we went on separate journeys, since then we've come together to bring these stories to life and share perspectives with our audience as well as our guests. Welcome back to another episode of Fast Friends with Dan Walsh. I have my co-host, Justin Faber, my two favorite teammates in the trenches with me, Luke Walton and Steve Coppola. And I have to say, this is manifest destiny with this fast friend, Giuseppe Lanzone, who I can't wait to hear the shared perspective of how we met further on in the episode. But Juice, welcome to the show. We're really happy to have you, and this is going to be fun.
Thanks for having me, Dan, and everybody in the team here. Dan, when Dan told me about that he was doing this podcast, I was upset. I was not the first one that he brought me in. But, here I am, a few episodes in, and I've been really enjoying seeing all these familiar faces being part of this podcast and all the guests that you've brought in prior to me. So this is gonna be fun. I've been looking forward for this and seeing you guys over the camera.
Well, Justin, who, like I said, he was the coxswain at Northeastern. He's literally one of the best coxswains I've had. And he's the man. And this is one of my favorite parts is we get to find out a little bit about you, right? Like Justin is going to tell the audience why you're here.
Yeah, no, exactly. Thanks, Dan. Exactly. So Giuseppe, not to worry. You're in the top 10. You might not be the first guest we had, but we're within the first 10 episodes. So you're certainly a top 10 guest. So you made the top 10 list.
One of the OGs. One of the OGs.
Yeah, one of the OGs for sure. But just to give the audience an appreciation for who we're talking to and why we wanted you on Fast Friends quickly was just to give everybody a background. So Giuseppe, came to know everybody through rowing, was a super highly recruited junior athlete out of high school. I remember he was recruited to Northeastern actually, where it didn't kind of pan out, but he wound up going on to row at University of Washington and became multi-time Pac-10 champion, a national champion, later went on to become a two-time Olympian, 2010 U.S. Rowing Athlete of the Year, was a brand ambassador, aka model for Polo for a bit, which again, that's a whole nother episode that we could probably have another podcast about eventually. Was a former, collegiate coach on the lightweight level at Georgetown. And, I think the really interesting part that we'll dig into later is he's also a really successful entrepreneur with his brand Peruvian Brothers, which is a fast casual down in the D.C. area, which we'll talk all about. It's making me really hungry because I haven't had dinner yet, and I love Peruvian food. So without further ado, Giuseppe's on. We're hyped. We have an incredible episode in front of us where we're going to get to, I think, talk about life, rowing, the Olympic journey that we've kind of gone on with other guests. But I think we're also going to get to talk about the after. And we're going to get to talk about life lessons and how those things translate into business and business success. So hyped to have you on, Giuseppe. And yeah, I'll flip it back to Dan and we'll crank into it.
All right, Juice. I mean, you're literally watching me every day in the garage, right? You and Steve are over my shoulder. And that 2006 race is pretty epic. But to me, that race is really important, and it's really important with you. And Justin mentioned you were one of the top recruited juniors in America, if not the top recruited junior. And if I remember correctly, you won Crash Bees that year in the junior category.
No, I came in third.
Third, okay.
Olaf, was it Olaf Tuft? No, not Olaf Tufta. A single scholar from somewhere in Europe that did really good in the 2012 Olympics and 2016 Olympics actually came in first. I was a top American. I came in third in Crash Bees, but I was a top American, and a couple other international guys came after me, and then the next American was a few seconds behind. So that crash piece really set me up for colleges, but it didn't start there. It literally started the year before when I came in fifth at crash piece after training a whole winter. And it was a training session where I knew that I had to train hard in the winters, rain, snow, whatever it took, but I had to get to the erg practice every morning. We would erg in the mornings, we would lift the weights, we would erg in the afternoons. I don't think I trained as hard as I did in high school until I got to the national team.
That's awesome. And the other beautiful part about getting to know you back then when we were, both really children, but I love the fact that you were a football player too.
Yeah.
And you were a good football player. And
Yeah.
one of the things that I think is really powerful about your story is, one, how you got introduced to rowing. And I'd love to hear more about that, especially for the audience, but also like how you went from starting rowing as this really good football player and making that choice, because there's always this like thought that, I can't stand this when people say, oh, rowers are people that couldn't be athletes in other sports. And I think it's ridiculous because rowers are some of the best athletes that I know. And you're one of those athletes that had a choice to row and you chose that. So I just really would love to know, like, what was your call to adventure in the sport of rowing? Like, what drawed you into it?
Well, it all started, if you really want to go in detail, it all started, I used to be in the varsity team for football. I was all district, all region, captain of the team. I played both ways. I pretty much was on the team, on the field the whole time. And it's something that I literally learned my sophomore year in college, not knowing what to do, because obviously you guys know I'm originally from Peru, born and raised in Peru. I came here my freshman year in high school, knowing a little bit of English, I know English a little bit more now than I did before, but that's for another podcast.
I have to be
Well,
nice
I think it's
to you.
important. I think it's important though to understand the background, right? So you didn't come to the U.S. until your freshman year of high school. So you're 14, 15 years old. You joined the football program. You're obviously quickly successful. Take us from there. Sorry, just to give some context setting.
Right. I was just 6'3", 200 pounds as a junior in high school. So I was lucky enough that during one of those practices when I was going out to play football, my high school coach, my mentor to this day, this guy called Jim Mitchell. I just celebrated his birthday at one of my restaurants with him and his family. He grabbed me and he's like, oh, you're going to row. And I was like, oh, yeah, okay. My dad rowed in Peru for about 8 years, at the national level, never internationally. So, and I rowed in Peru for about 2-3 months, very recreational when I was a kid. So I knew the sport of rowing. I'm from the ocean. I grew up, rowing different types of boats, like nothing like a shell, but just like a regular boat that you can row. So I was like, yeah, let's do it. I was in pretty good shape from playing football, from being active. I used to be a swimmer too for a year or two in high school, and I picked it up, and I ended up being pretty good from the first practice, and then I was coachable. This guy Jim destroyed me during practice. He really didn't took it easy on us, and that's why I got formed the way I got formed to begin with, because I only knew one way of training, and that was you go until you puke. You don't go any easier till there was not a good it was not a good practice that you didn't exert yourself enough if you didn't puke. We would do 3x3 minutes, and things like that, where you just had to go until you couldn't go anymore. And that was my junior year, where I came in fifth at Crash Piece, I think with a time of 6:13, something like that, 6:18, I think, or 6:13. I don't remember.
We'll go with 6:13. It's okay. It's okay. We're old now.
Yeah. By the way, I pulled it up. Your senior year, it was Cynic from the Czech.
Andrew Cynic. Yeah. But if you want to go even farther back, you can.
I was 11th. So I was a little bit back. I was in the back row. I was
Slacker,
11th
Steve.
in that.
You're slacking.
But one thing about Crush Beast, in order to go to Crush Beast, I actually got some money to go to Crush Beast because there's the Mid-Atlantic Sprints here in Alexandria. You get all the prep schools in the front and all the big guys in the front that have the monitors, and then you have rows and rows and rows of people in the back. And back in the day, whenever you cross the 500-meter mark, they raise a flag behind you. And I just remember like my junior year, like it was yesterday. Like I was going at it. I didn't know how I was going to do. I just knew that I trained, and my coach was like, this is the plan. And you're gonna go as fast as you can. He was behind me, yelling at me, and I remember just finishing up and sort of like blacking out, passing out, because that's the only way we train. And this person comes to me, and he's like, "Oh," and I tell him like, don't, in my broke ass English, I was like, "Oh, don't worry. If I pass out, just call 911." And she goes like, "I'm 911." So, and my coach ends up grabbing me and just lifting me up by force. And he's like, "Dude, you won. You won." I was like, "What do you mean I won?" And I won with a time of I think it was 6:18 back then, and I won the Mid-Atlantic Sprints, and that's why I was able to go to Crash Beast. That was the first year, and then we ended up, that's the fall. Winter we train. No, that's the end of the winter, I guess. The winter we train, and then we ended up going undefeated in rowing a Cox 4 during the spring. Then we row all summer circuits, the St. Catharines, U.S. Nationals, and I'm trying to really remember all the names. And my coaches really put us out there, and he gave us the ability to row. Obviously, I couldn't afford any of this, so he's like, "Don't worry, just come, and we'll take care of you." And he just kept pushing me and pushing me and pushing me, until the fall came. And in the fall, I played football. I got, at the end of football, I got offers from a few different D2 and D3 schools. Until that time during the fall, like I didn't know where I was going to go. I knew I had to finish football and then focus on rowing, because for rowing, it was the difference between going to community college, but there's nothing wrong with it, or having an opportunity to go to a different school to row. At this point, Jim, my coach, my mentor, already went to my parents' house and said, "Hey," he was like, "I need to go to your parents' house to talk to him." I was like, "Okay." My mom knew a little bit of English. My dad didn't know any English. Still to this day, he doesn't know any English. He just knows a bit of it. And he said, you need to support your son, because at one point he's going to go to the Olympics. This is after Crash Beast, my junior year. And they were both like, "Sure, okay." So I remember these things, but I don't remember exactly the exact words, but that was the thought of it. Like, this guy comes into my house. I know him for like, a few months, and he's like, you need to support your son because he's going to go to the Olympics. And you hear that in movies and things like that, but this has actually happened to me. And it's funny to tell you guys because it's something that I have to really bring back to memory. Anyways, my senior year, after training, after going to practice every single day, and that was probably the only season that I actually enjoyed erging. That I went to practice and I enjoyed erging because I knew I had to get faster, and I knew I had to get the top time in order to get a chance to go to a university. By this time, schools like Harvard and Brown have sent me like the generic letters, blah, 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 blah. You need to do this. But obviously my grades were not great. I'm a 3.0 student, still taking ESL. My SATs, were not good. Obviously, my math was fine. My English was horrible. I was taking the Princeton SAT prep, still didn't work. But then my senior year, I ended up going to the Mid-Atlantic Sprints, and I remember that when you see the little carrots going like that, and my goal was to have my carrot be the only one in the screen. So I ended up finishing the Mid-Atlantic Sprints with my carrot being the only one on the screen ahead of everybody else. I ended up going to Crash Beast, and I believe I was leading until the last 500 meters, and that's when the camera shut down and I blacked out. I ended up coming in third place. which he was good enough to come up with a 6:05 my senior year in high school. And that's when schools like, Northeastern, Rutgers University, Cal Berkeley, University of Washington really took an interest in me. Brown, funny enough, Brown really took an interest in me, but my SATs were not that good. So I kind of got like, never applied to Brown, but I got rejected because my SATs were not that good. I was like, I believe it was Scott Roop,
Yeah.
the one that was like, you can't come. So that put a chip in my shoulder, and I was like, so when I went to so like when I like one of the I'll end up the story with my recruiting trip with Northeastern with Dan at the end. But when I went to Cal Berkeley, it was fine. Nothing wrong, Luke. But it was a good recruiting trip. But I thought that the campus where they row was just too far away from me. When I went to Rutgers University, I went to visit Stitt, Sam Stitt to it, and I was just like, oh, it's fun, but I don't want to come here. And then when I went to University of Washington, I went there for the Winnie Cup Regatta, and I had an excellent time. It's the best weekend to go for rowing at Washington. They offered me a full ride, so I had to take that over you, Dan. And to complete all my recruiting trips, I also went to Northeastern. And I stayed with Dan Walsh, the famous Dan Walsh, the national team guy, Dan Walsh, the big guy, Dan Walsh, the wrestler, Dan Walsh, that now has a Conan sore. So I remember like it was yesterday, to be honest with you. I remember you cooking in your kitchen and us chatting, being like, my plans is to go to the national team. I used to wrestle and I want to go to the national team. And I was like, yeah, I guess one day I can go to the national team if I get my citizenship and whatever. Back then, I was not even a resident. I was just on my way to getting a residency. And we were like, maybe one day we'll row together, and maybe one day we'll be in the national team. And what was that? 6 years later, we ended up, winning a bronze medal at the 2006 World Championships.
Yeah. It's very, dude, that's beautiful, man. That's like one way to be succinct with all that time. Like you may be number 8 in the lineup, but you're number 1 in speed, baby.
Yeah.
And 2, one of the things that's been really interesting about this show is just the kind of manifestation of like, I want to be good. And Luke, Steve, and I talk about this, and Luke, and I kind of talk about like getting to the national team. You kind of know who you're racing against, and you look forward to that time when you're not competing against each other at the IRA, but you get to row together for the first time. That recruiting trip is it's very memorable to me too. Your persona, right? Like, knowing that you had come from a very similar background to me. I think that's what I remember chatting about in the kitchen, is just you and I just came from this different cloth into this sport that seemed like just we were surrounded by affluence. If it wasn't for the generosity of people like Jim Mitchell, or in my case, Norman Weinberger, rowing wouldn't have been an opportunity. And I love the way that you described the training, because the training kind of started to manifest the fact that you could be great. And, we put that seed in our brains about being on the same team back then. And what I'm really interested to know about is like when, like those early trials of learning how to train, choosing that college, like when did you really start to embrace the grind of rowing? Like when did you feel like you knew what you were going to have to do to yourself to get better? Like, did that's come in high school, or like did UW bring more of that out of you? You kind of said that Jim Mitchell's training didn't really feel the same to the national team, but I'd love to know, like, when did you really feel like you knew how to work for what you wanted to make happen in your life?
Well, Dan, to be quite honest with you, my first car, I had to work at a pizza place to get it. I had to work Wednesdays 5 to 10, Fridays 5 to 10, Saturdays 10 to 10, and Sundays 10 to 6. And that's how I bought my first car. So that's how I had to work hard for it. For training, it was, for me, it was either, going to a D2, D3 school, community college or something like that, or busting my ass and going to a D1, one of the best schools in the world for not only academics, but also for rowing. So when Jim was like, "Hey, you got to do this," and he was not easy coach, and it was not a big program. I mean, we went undefeated in the state of Virginia pretty much my junior and senior year with 5 people on the team, 6 people on the team, rowing a 4. So it was not a big group. I think from the beginning, like I said, I am. People ask me all the time, how did you start? I'm like, well, I was lucky. I was lucky to find someone that, took me under the wing and just be like, you go as hard as you can, you train as hard as you can. I'm gonna get you the best boat. We used to row an Empacker. I'm gonna get you the best oars. We used to row with Empacker oars. And I'm gonna make sure you're well fed and well traveled, and you're gonna stay in good hotels, so you have no excuses to not to win. His mentality was, there's no such thing as luck. It's only skills. You don't say good luck. You say use your skills. And that's how my mentality to this day is. I don't believe some luck you believe, but in reality, it's how well prepared you are. And that's just how I pretty much live my life. It's all about the preparation, all about how you prepare before a regatta, being a dad, going out on a date. You got to do your homework. And, how well you prepare, it's how well the outcome is going to be for the most part. I mean, there's some luck in it, but that's not how I train. That's not how we train.
So
it's all about preparation.
Just a quick question. I agree with you. Luck is made, so to speak, in the prep. Going back though, I think you had an intrinsic motivation, obviously to separate out, okay, football, where that could lead you versus rowing, where that could lead you, and kind of seeing that script play out if it was a movie. Going back to Jim, though, I think that's kind of a really important thing to untackle real quick. If you have a sense, like, what do you think was his motivation? And the only reason I'm asking you this is, like, it is very few and far between sometimes. I mean, I think that there are special people that come into your life. There are special people that mentor you, grow you, and kind of groom you to become greater than what you may know yourself to be at a certain point in your, maturity level, right? I mean, you're talking about you're 16, 17, 18 years old at this point. Do you think he had any intrinsic motivation? Like, did he, or is he just like, hey, I know that I have a special person on my hands. I have to do my best to ensure that I'm making them successful. Like, I'm just wondering, and this is maybe a question for the other 3 guys on the call too, from a coach's perspective, but just like, it sounds like he really did a lot in mentoring you, which again is not always the case as far as like, a team goes. Now, I think the other thing to mention, and you didn't mention where you were in high school, outside of the location, but I don't know the name of the school, but like 5, 6 people on a team, by the way, for the audience, couple things. 5 or 6 people on a team to go win a state championship, be undefeated in a state like Virginia, which has a pretty popular rowing program across the entire state. And then to do it on a pool of 5 or 6 people is pretty unheard of. And then secondarily, just to level set, going back, the Crash Bees are an international indoor rowing competition, standard times that can be measured across the globe. As far as if you pull this time at that location, it's pretty measurable globally. So that's where Giuseppe was talking about, hey, if I knew if I performed here, I could get highly recruited on people's radar pretty quickly. So just to kind of go back there, but yeah, I just didn't know if there was anything in Jim's psyche as far as like, hey, I've done this before, I could do this again, or this is my opportunity to prove out an amazing, athlete, who I think has potential. I just didn't know if there was anything more to that than simply like, he was a kick-ass coach and he did you really well.
I mean, Justin, that's a great question. I've actually never asked him why were you so good to me? But he likes to go fast.
Mm-hmm.
to go fast, and he doesn't have to have excuses, and he takes no bullshit. You know, there's two coaches that have made me cry. He's one of them. And it's not because he was beating me. He was because he was that he asked so much of me, and I wanted to go, and I wanted to go fast, and I wanted to train fast. And it didn't matter if my hands were bleeding because of all the blisters, and we would go from sculling to sweeping, and the top of my hands would be bleeding from scratching from crossing.
Yep.
And you know, he always expect his mentality was like, I'm gonna give you the best tools to win. I'm gonna give you the best training. I'm gonna give you the best boat. I'm gonna give you a good hotel for you to stay when we're away. I'm gonna make sure you're well fed, and you'll have no excuses for you not to perform and to win.
Sure.
And that's why, you know, that's why he wanted me. He wanted it to go fast. And we did it, and it worked. And I think his method of training, it helped me become a better person, a tougher person, a person that could go to the University of Washington with, you know, the best college athletes, and be in the varsity, be the only rower in the varsity team, to be in every single race in the varsity boat my sophomore, junior, and senior year. You know, be a Pac-10 athlete of the year, you know, twice in a row. It helped me get through all those things, because I was coming from a program that was like, you had not a one-on-one coach, but he coached me during the winter, he coached me during the spring, and he coached me during the summers. And it was a nonstop, going from Indianapolis for the U.S. national championships, to going to St. Catharines, to going up to Philly, to just to grind, and it was just a way of living. So next time I see him, and I ask him, hey, why did you do what you did with me? Because honestly, I don't know. I mean, he probably saw potential in me.
Yeah.
And he's, you know, and he likes to go fast. So
that's it. That's simple enough.
And I was doing decent when I was in high school.
That's what I love about it. I think everyone's rowing stories, everyone has that, like, you know, that Obi-Wan figure who just kind of like taps you on the shoulder, and it's like, yo, you are going to be great. Like, we're going to will it. You're going to be great. Like, this is going to happen. You're not going to have a choice. This is going to happen. And for you, it was Jim. You know, for me, it was this old guy, Jack Hayland. You know, for Dan, I forget, was it your pediatrician's name, right? Like,
well, no, Norman didn't want me to die. So that's like, Schnarline was the one that, Schnarline's the coach that kind of,
but everyone,
yeah.
It's like you get tapped into this like club, right? Like you get like this tap on the shoulder where it's like you're just like introduced to like a whole new level. And they're like, no, like, and you know, Juice, I was listening to it, and I almost think, to me, it sounds like Jim like expected more from you, and you wanted to live up to that. Like, it was almost like he had high expectations. He knew your capabilities, and he demanded your best, and you wanted to give it.
I think it's that. I think I saw opportunity. You know, you gotta remember, I come here from Peru, from, you know, living on the beach in a small town where everybody was an uncle or an aunt, a lot of friends, and we pretty much come here with a hand in front, a hand behind, and to live in McLean, Virginia, where everything was just different. You couldn't just go hang out with your friends. You couldn't do much. The first 6 months of me living here was fun. My freshman year in high school, but then it's like, what am I doing here? I'm like a fish out of the water here. And it took me a while to get a place. But then when your teachers start hanging your newspaper articles in the class, and they let you sleep in your first period class because they know you're coming back from practice, you know, before high school, you start just looking up a little bit more and seeing more opportunities. So I think I think Jim, saw potential in me, and he pushed me, and I saw potential in what could happen. I never thought about going to the Olympics, to be quite honest with you, or going to the national team till I meet people like Dan. They're like, oh, I want to go to. I'm training for the national team, blah blah blah, and then you start seeing more and seeing more, and then I ended up going to the University of Washington, and then that's where I can see a bigger picture of what rowing is all about.
I mean, that was the Jim Mitchells, the Joe Schneerlines. I think you've coached now, Juice. Justin has been a leader in the corporate setting. Steve and Luke both coach too. It is one of those things where you see an athlete and they're different. How they move amongst their cohort. Like talent, identifying talent is such a incredible gift to be able to see it. And I think seeing you at Northeastern on that recruiting trip is like one of those things where I really felt, because I had been to a couple of U23 camps at that point. I had made the junior team at that point. So I had started to see what this talent was. And it makes sense why you weren't there yet, because to your point, you weren't a resident. And I think that's really interesting, is that you
I was invited. I was invited, but I couldn't go.
Right, but you couldn't go, right? So you couldn't go. And so I think about one, you mentioned Stitt, who's another incredible oarsman and Olympian. And you and him were rowing in high school together.
Yes.
And then you go to Washington, right? And so at Washington, I think about that era of Washington. You have Matt Deacon, you have experience rowing with, and Olympic gold medalist. Scott Gall, Olympic bronze medalist. Brett Newland, 2-time Olympian. Sam Burns, multiple-time national team oarsman. John Burns, multiple-time national team oarsman. Like, the talent that you had at Washington at that point was amazing too. So what was it like to kind of go into that environment as not only one of the top recruits, but also now surrounded by a team of Americans like you that are knocking on the door of IRA championships and Pac-12 championships against a legacy that Luke started at Cal. Harvard, right? I think at that point started coming, and Yale started coming back into the IRA. So the IRA is now getting more competitive than it's ever been. And here you are setting the pace for that. Tell us a little bit about like what was that like for you to kind of take on that responsibility? Like it had to be a little bit more difficult going into that.
I remember one of the first practices with the freshman team at University of Washington. I remember there were about 50 people there, and I remember Fred Humbine said, "I'm only going to fill out like 3/8 or something like that." And I'm thinking to myself, as a full scholarship athlete, oh shit, I better not get cut. I never thought of myself to this day, you know me. I never thought of myself as the best rower or the best recruit or whatever. It's like it's always you gotta go in with a chip on your shoulder. And of course, I remember the IRS, like, we won the IRS that year. And even after winning the IRA, I see the varsity guys, the Matt Deacon guys, the John Norton guys being like, wow, like these guys are big in my own team. After training with them for a year, like I still thought they were like just much bigger and stronger than me. But it was great to be able to be part of a team where, you have Matt Deacon as a gold medalist, for 04, yeah, 04.
Mm-hmm.
But you see all these people like that are just stronger and better than you, and you always have to keep going. I never thought of myself as the fastest or strongest guy in the team, but I saw myself as a catalyst, a loud mouth in the boat that got people in the boat going. I never thought of, yeah, I'm the stronger, so I'm the best rower. But if I'm rowing behind Steve Coppola, I'm gonna make him the fastest because I'm gonna be in his ear, yelling at him and telling him to go faster, just like I was taught when I was in high school. And that's why, it's always like, you don't want to talk too much shit to your teammates, but you want to be in their ears, really, really pushing them. And that's, even at the University of Washington, I think to this day, I still have one of the better ERG scores. But, when Brett Newland came around, he destroyed me. So it didn't really matter. It's always like, how I try to be a catalyst more than the best of the strongest or the best rower, just to be a catalyst.
And that, I mean, you are, right? There's no denying that. Like you're one of the best. You are one of the best boat movers. You are one of the best motivators. You knew that there was going to be a different energy when you got into the boat, and that it was going to be tougher to beat. And I think that I remember one of my first real feelings of dread of the pressure was, coming out of my high school program. I was it was rowing was so new in Fairfield County, which is crazy to think about now of how big it is. But coming out of there as the faster recruit was fairly easy. Getting into Northeastern, I remember meeting Scott Fentress, who's been a 20-year Navy SEAL now, and he was a world champion, and thinking I was going to beat him on the first stadium ever, and he just whips my ass, like, and it was one of those moments where I felt like, oh my God, I'm in way deeper of a pool than I thought I was going to be into. And there is something magical about going through a competitive IRA program where it does transform you. And I think it got, what it does do well, if you become a catalyst on an IRA program, and you are either medaling at sprints or medaling at the Pac-12s, and you're knocking on the medals at the IRA and you're in that final, it does set you up for that national team. But you had one of the most amazing hurdles of anybody I've ever met going into the national team, right? and that was becoming a resident and
a citizen.
A citizen, yeah, becoming, truly becoming a full passport holding American. And I'd love to hear more about, because that was like your second year on the national team camp. Like your first year, you went in and kind of on the periphery. Year. Yeah, but you were on the periphery, but because you weren't an American, no one gave you any attention, because what were you going to do?
2006, I moved to Princeton, New Jersey on March of 2006. No, maybe it was.
Yeah.
Was it March, Steve?
It was like that winter. It was that winter. Yeah.
But I remember before going to Princeton, my mother, she's a saint. Like all of this is happening because my mom is also pushing me from the silence without nobody knowing. We stopped at a lawyer's office to say, hey, I need to put in my paperwork because I'm gonna go train with the national team, but I need to be a citizen. Okay. So we put in the paperwork, we do whatever we have to do, and she drives me to Princeton and drops me off with like 2 unisuits and like a backpack full of stuff. And I remember getting to the Aquinas and finding my way around. I remember I knew Troy Pepper. Yeah. He was living in the Aquinas back then. And that was pretty much the only guy that I know that I was training with the national team. I was like, hey, what's up, man? Like, you remember me from, because I think we went to the recruiting trip at Washington together too. So I knew him a little bit more than just from racing against him, because, we didn't talk to Cal people. We hated Cal people. You know how it is. I mean, now I'm friends with Cal people, but before it was like, you don't race for the IRS, you race to beat Cal. And you guys race to beat Washington.
Sounds very familiar.
But I get to the Aquinas and I start training, and we start going at it. Matt Schnobergen, he was in your show before. He actually just stayed with me recently, and we were just chatting about it. I remember in that 2006 time, me making the 8 with you guys, going down the time trial, making the time fast enough to go to the World Championships. But then Mike Tatey takes me out of the boat because he's like, you're not a citizen. I can't do anything with you. At that point, I was like literally 50-50. Like that was one of the most stressful summers of my life. I lost so much weight. My mom lost so much weight. I wasn't eating, I wasn't sleeping, I was just training and trying to stay alive, because it was whether I am fast enough to make the team, but I'm not a citizen, so I can't go to the team to the world championship in Eton in 2006. So what ends up happening, Jim Mitchell comes back into the picture. I don't know what he does. I don't know how much money he paid. I don't know what donation he had to make to the right person. I don't know what door he had to knock. But it was pretty much grabbing my application from the bottom and putting it at the top. And I get a phone call. It was a Wednesday, and I'm coming out of training from Mercer Lake in Princeton, and he calls me around 9 o'clock, and he's like, "You need to be here in Washington, in Virginia, in Washington D.C. At noon." It takes about 3.5 hours to drive from Princeton to Virginia. It took me 2 hours and 45 minutes. I drove in my unisuit. I drove in my unisuit, listening on the car on the tape cassette the questions for the test to pass my citizenship test. That of course I've been practicing with Steve, with Marcus, with everybody that was around. They all make fun of me because I was always practicing the, who's Francis Scott Key and all these questions that I had no idea who they were.
Don't worry, we don't either.
Most American citizens don't know either.
Yeah, that was fun. That was fun.
Yeah, fun for you because you went to Princeton, Steve. But anyways, I get to Virginia. Jim's waiting for me outside the immigration or the citizenship place. I literally put a shirt on. I'm still like, sweating from practice. I put a pair of pants on. I walk into the place. This is Wednesday at noon. I sit in front of a guy, and he takes a test one-on-one with me, and I answer the first 7 questions right. And you have to study 100 questions, but they only test you on 10. And if you answer the first 7 right, then you're good, because you have to get 7 out of 10. So I answered the 7 questions right there, and then they take me to a room full of people that were getting sworn in. So I get sworn in, I get my citizenship, but then I need my passport to be able to travel. They give me a paper saying, take this to the passport place at this other location in Maryland or whatever. You have to go there and you have to ask for your passport. So on Thursday morning, I go to this passport place and say, hey, I'm applying for my passport. I need my passport. He's like, oh, it's coming 2 weeks. I'm like, no. I need it now. I'm like, oh, but you have to come in 2 weeks. It takes 2 weeks for you to get your passport. He's like, here's the letter. And they go like, okay, well, come back in 2 hours. So I grabbed the passport. In 2 hours. I drove back up to Princeton on Thursday, and I believe I trained with a team on that Thursday night, and then I wanted to practice Friday morning before we got into the airplane. And I remember, I think Chris Lipsky was like, no, I don't want to practice. Let's just go straight to the airport. So we ended up just training one time with me again in the boat, and we ended up the story that I like to tell is like we ended up just going to England, and then 2 weeks later we came back home with a bronze medal, and Dan and I finally got our dream back of going and racing internationally and winning a medal with the national team. Something that we talked back then was 6 years before. So that's one of my favorite stories of my rowing career. How you kind of like close a circle there of what we thought we wanted to do and what we actually did.
Dude, it's so awesome to hear your view, because meanwhile, like, we're just rowing and we're like, is it gonna happen? Is it gonna happen? Like,
yeah,
it was like every other practice. It was you, it was Ben Harrison.
Yeah.
And it was
Justin, for you in the audience, like,
yeah. Can you, for the, because I have so many questions on like what is coming out of Mike's mouth, like just how, what's his mindset on like this guy, I just, I think there's probably an amazing story
to me
had
before
there
we
too.
go too far. Juice, you're giving all credit to Jim. To some of us in the boat, Mike was like talking about all the phone calls he was making too.
Oh,
Like-
it took it. Let me complete
I
that.
think there was
Okay,
a
yeah, 'cause
family
I'm like-
around you.
There was
Yeah.
there were phone calls. There were letters from Mike. There was letters from the national team committee. There were all these things that happened before, but the person that gave me the phone call and said, "Hey, you need to be down here," was Jim.
Got it.
Like we went through all the avenues of letters from Mike Tatey, letters from U.S. Rowing, trying to reach to the congressman of Virginia, the senator of Virginia, trying to get all these pieces together, and nothing was clicking. Nothing was clicking. The time was passing.
Wait,
It's
you know who
tr-
almost messed it
crazy.
up for you, right? You know who almost messed that up for you through U.S. rowing was Zeno Mueller.
Yeah,
Because in 04, they pushed through his citizenship to row the single, and then he bailed at the starting line.
well, thankfully,
But they-
thankfully
so,
that
yeah.
didn't go towards me.
Well,
And that's
dude,
why
we
I
were
give
rooting
credit
for
to
you.
Jim.
Yeah.
Dude, we were. I mean, and Steve, it's just funny because the way that 8 came together was crazy too. Because Leeski came back from, I think, law school. He was up at BC. I was sculling, and then decided, like, when Corzo wanted me to row the double, I was about to go train in Boston, and then Imes just kind of asked me to come row for a practice and go back to sweep. Ken Drakowski was sculling and came to sweep, right? I think Daniels had just got back from Oxford, maybe.
Yeah. Mike
Yeah.
was trying to get me to not go to Henley.
Yeah, Steve was not going to Henley. And so it was like all of a sudden we started putting some guys in the boat. It kept getting faster and faster. And then we had that lineup, and it was like, oh, we're top gold medal standard. And the 4 was prioritized with Brett, and they were fast, man. Like they made the final that year. They were a fast 4. So we had the better gold standard in practice. And every day was just like, I remember we're all like, all right, Juice has to get his passport. Like every day, Juice has to get his passport. We got to have this lineup. And it's not, nothing against Ben Harrison. He was just young. He was just really young at the time, and you were better than him. That's part of sports, right? You were just better than him.
Yeah.
And I remember doing time trials every day leading up to that week, like one with Juice, one with Ben, one with Juice, one with Ben.
I just
And-
remember that my times were fast, and I was like, I got to do something.
No, it was obviously faster. And like to your point,
Yeah.
your
Yeah,
energy
it was going well with Ben, but there was an edge that it had with you in it.
I had a mullet back then.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's the
We
difference
had
than
some
now?
fun. We had
Now
some fun.
everything is long now.
Yeah.
But just going back though, like you mentioned it a little bit about obviously like your family support, right? Like your mom is like overly invested, right? She's losing a lot of sleep over it. But like, can you talk a little bit about that side of it too? Like, everybody on the call has been in that camp system, where it's like it's heavy enough to do the training. Can you talk about layering on this like anxiety that you had about like, shit, like I know I'm in the boat, but there's a piece of paper in my way, and like how that mentally like compartmentalized when you got onto the water and then would like come back as you're laying in bed, probably staring at the ceiling. Like how did that kind of manifest itself in order to kind of, and again, I think it goes back to your mindset you talked about, like you just grind, you just work hard, right? But like I think it's important to understand like life's hard, like unforeseen circumstances are stuff you can't really like. There's semantics that are a pain in the ass in your life along the way. How did you kind of compartmentalize that? Again, you're at a different maturity level in your life now, so looking back, it may be a different kind of thought. But how do you kind of think through that, right? Like there's an anxiety that I think you probably overcame as far as you were able to look at the data and see that you were the faster guy. So that maybe quenched some of that anxiety of like, you're not going to get cut potentially, but you had this anxiety of a stupid sheet of paper, saying like, no, you can't participate until this 20 sheet of paper booklet, is in your hand. Like, how did you compartmentalize that during that time, if at all?
Well, that was not the only thing that I have that I have to put on the side. It's
Okay.
it's going to the supermarket to buy food, and your credit card not going, your debit card
Sure.
not going to food because you have no money because you're still new in the team. So I would have to call my mom and like, hey mom, can you put some money on my card because I need to buy food to eat, Or going to the movie theaters, you know, I'm watching 2 movies in a row because the movie theater had AC and the Aquinas didn't.
Sure.
You know, the citizenship just was one more thing that was just on the way of doing what I wanted to do, which was, you know, going and rowing in the national team level and going to represent the USA. And for me, it was just something that I had to. It was when I trained, it was not a factor. At least from
Sure.
what I remember, when I trained, it was like, you know, you train and each
Out of sight, out of mind. Sure. Mhm.
you try to go as hard as you can.
Yep.
Every time, over and over and over.
Got it.
Yeah,
For me, just listening as this has progressed from you coming to the States, high school, starting to row, rowing until you puke, realizing there's potential to get into the best university possible through rowing, realizing there's the potential, you know, talking with Dan, hey, maybe someday we can represent the United States on the national team. And then like hearing the story and how you went about it, and mom, can we get some money? You know, I need to eat. There's AC, there's this, there's all these things, that all these sort of impediments and roadblocks and obstacles that are in front of you. And I just hope that the audience, for anyone who's listening, if it's rowing or whatever it is, ask yourself how bad you want it. Like, how bad do you want it? Because like that's what keeps going through my head over and over and over with your story. How bad do you want it? Whatever it is that you want, because your ability to so matter-of-factly recall all of this, and I'm sure it was extremely emotional at the time, but yeah, that came up and I needed to deal with it. Yeah, that came up and I needed to deal with it. Yeah, that came up, and all of it in the quest to do exactly what you said just a few minutes ago, which was to earn the right to represent the United States in rowing. And it's like, I don't care what anybody is doing. If you're into rowing or not into rowing and you're listening to this, just ask yourself, whatever it is you're pursuing, like, how bad do you want it? Because this is that story. Like, this literally is that story. So I kind of knew your story, but I didn't. And this is amazing, man. It's just, I'm like all fired up. I'm very fired up about this, obviously. And you know, I don't want to hijack anything, but I do just want to go back just real quickly. That's the intersection, right? We were talking about coaches, and we were talking about why it is that your coach, what it is that your coach, you know, why he was there, not only in high school, but he's the guy trying to figure out how to make the phone call and tell you, get down here now. Now's the time. He's there the entire time. And he's there because of the intersection, right? The intersection of, for any coach, which is, I have skills as a coach, I can help athletes, I can develop athletes, I can motivate athletes, but they have to want it. So he clearly saw, in pushing you, he saw, oh yeah, he wants it. He's bleeding on top of his knuckles right now. He wants it. He'll row until he pukes. He wants it. And so I'm just fascinated by that intersection. And so for me as a coach, it's like, and Dan, what you were talking about, you know, like talent is different, but also the desire within talent is clearly different, right? There are a lot of talented people out there in all sorts of different walks of life, and a lot of talented rowers out there. But then there are rowers that have talent and the desire. And I think like that's what we're hearing right now, which is like just fascinating. It's just fascinating. So just thought I'd kind of throw that in there. I mean, I'm on the edge of my seat as this story continues, as those guys were, as they're sitting in the 8 being like, so is Juice coming with us to the Worlds this year? Like, we'd love to have him. Is this happening?
Dude, Luke, that phone call was like better than any Christmas present as a kid. Like, we were, I forget whose phone we were around, but we're on the Mercer apron because we were training out of Mercer that time, and that's where we were doing all the time trialing and stuff. And literally, like, we knew the test was over, and we're just waiting around, just like. And kind of Ben Harrison is probably the only one that's like, please don't get it. You know? He's like the only person that's like, and so somebody's phone rings and it's like, you just hear like, hello? And like, dude, I'm an American, you know? And we're like, yeah. You know, you talk about a movie moment. You talk about a movie moment where it's like, we're all like, well, hurry up, we got practice, you know? Like, celebration's over. We got work to do. We got to go to Worlds. You know, and that Worlds too. It, you know, here's a fun fact about that World Championship. So it's 2006. It's Eton. It's the future course of the London 2012 games. We win the heat, we win the semi, and then we get third in the final.
We should have won or come in second.
Yeah, and so what's very interesting about that race,
those Italians.
What's interesting about that race is after that race is when FISA admitted that they had to seed lanes in adverse weather because the crosswind was empirically unfair in that race. So you race the conditions you have and you race the people that show up. But and this is just more for, like, I think you, for the guys on this call, on this conversation, for the people that are watching, and really grateful that we have more and more people watching. You are world class, right? Like that, a medal at Worlds is tougher than we think. We were inheriting an era of where the U.S. men's 8, if you had a bad regatta, you got bronze. If you had a great regatta, you won. The margins of those wins and losses, but you had won the ultimate high school seat race, right? Because I think as a high school oarsman, the ultimate seat race is to seat race your way into the U.S. men's 8 and the, you know, women's side, the U.S. women's 8. We do have a passion for that. But I think what's incredible is that you had this ability to move all boats, man. You know, and I think that's the thing that's not really seen at the national team is very rarely can you make the 8 if you can only move 8, right? There is a little bit of specification, like some people do move other boats better than others. But your ability to move boat, single, pair, double, quad, like you are by far one of the best boat movers I've ever had the experience of rowing with. Just incredible. And you know, you kind of rode yourself from that 8 and that bronze and that performance to then being somebody that was looked at to improving the men's 4. Right? I would say that you were part of the process that helped lead to this gold medal that just happened in Paris, right? Where we wanted to show that the U.S. men were more than just the 8, but also the men's 4. And I would love to hear about what it was like for you to transition from getting that bronze and being in that 8 to leading up to Beijing, where, I mean, you made that 4 fast too. And what that was like transitioning from boat class to boat class.
You know, Dan, 2008, 2007, rowing with Volb on Snowbreak and Bow. It's a blur. To get back to you about being able to row small boats, again, it goes back to high school. It goes back to every summer while you guys were all training with the national team in 8s and banging your heads in 8s and 4s. I was rowing Canadian Henley in double, rowing in the senior B, the senior category, the junior category. Like rowing back to back races in the double, in the quad, and just learning how to move small boats. That's all I did. I never rowed an 8 till I got to the national team. To be quite honest with you, all I did was just small boats, small boats, small boats, and that's why I think it gave me an advantage. Now that I sit back and look back, it's like rowing all those small boats at a high pace, high level, high intensity. You know, we would only race, like, you know, the senior B race at St. Catharines. We would race the senior B, the senior B double, the senior double, the senior B quad, the senior quad. So it'll be 4 races in one regatta, which it was, you know, I would die if I do it now, but looking at back then, it was just like we trained in the Potomac here in D.C. to be able to race that many regattas at a high volume every single time. So to transition from rowing the 8 to rowing the 4, it was okay. I used to row the 4 in high school. I know how to row a 4, but also to be able to row with people like Brian Wolpingham and Bo Hoopman. They were Olympic champions. There were people that I like look up to. I'm like, I can't believe I'm in the boat with them. To Matt Schnoberg, I just, you know, it's was training with me while we were in the B team in Princeton while you guys were in Mercer. It was a huge thing for me. I mean, and the transition rowing was, I enjoy it. I getting that feeling. And it's funny that I'm thinking right now, and I'm actually looking at you, Dan, and I'm thinking about this quote from Arnold Schwarzenegger. You know, when he's pumping iron and he feels like he's coming, it's like the same thing when you're when you're rowing and the oars are coming out of the water at the same time, and you feel the surge on the boat, and everybody's rebounding at the same time. I'm coming up to the catch, and the catch, everybody's catch, and the blades didn't touch, and you're catching again, and you're picking up the speed, and you're bending the oars, and you're holding the oars underneath the water until they completely unfold and just sends the boat and makes it so easy. That's what that quote reminds me of. That's my Arnold Schwarzenegger quote for the sport of rowing. So that's why I was always trying to get to that feeling of effortless and speed while grinding, of course.
Dude, Juice, that was poetic right there. That was as eloquent as I've ever heard you be. But I got to say, like, you're still like the answer, and I'm not going to push you further, but I got to say, like, the answer, you're like, it's like asking like an Italian grandmother for her cookie recipe. And she's just like, yeah, a little bit of this and a little bit of this. And, you know, and then it's good. Right. Like that's how it was rowing with you. When we jumped in the pair, you're like, dude, just put your oar in and let's go. Like, and you're like, it's not that, and you're just like, no, just do it and go. It'll be fine. And it's like, for some of us, it was hard. Like, you know, the bigger the boat, the better I was. You know, I was like,
we know that, Steve.
but like you're, you know, like the pair, man, like you're just like, yeah, you just put it in and you just go, and it's great. Like,
you know, I give credit to all the people that I can, because I would not be sitting here talking with you guys if it was not a conglomerate of people that have gave me knowledge and taught me and helped me throughout the way. But
the SAT could take it now. Conglomerate's a nice big word, baby.
Did I just say that? No, after 20 something years of living in the US, you know, I gotta sound smart sometimes. But you know, another reason that I learned to row that is John Lorton. He topped in the national team back in the day. He was one of the really good guys at UW, and
Lorton's a beast. He's a beast.
I mean, to this day, I think he's doing some sort of martial arts. And he just tell me, like, you know, you just have to put the oar in the water and imagine there is some leaves on the water and just move the leaves over. That's all you have to do. Move the leaves over. And that's, I obviously we had to hammer it every single time. But at the end of the day, there was the technique, the feeling that you have to have in order to make it into a higher level, to make the boat go faster. Because at the end of the day, we're all getting the same training. You all are, you know, 6'6", 6'7", 6'9", Brett, and stronger. You know, we're all in the same training facility. So it's just those little things that, you know, the extra reach, the extra layback, the little things that are gonna impulse you to go faster. That's one. And the other thing is like, hey, if I have Dan Walsh in my team, I'm seat racing against somebody else, I know Dan Walsh was the fastest person in the boat. I know that for a fact. But if I can make Dan Walsh go faster because I'm yelling at him to go faster and I'm pushing him harder, then I'm going to have a better chance of winning my seat race, because he's going to go faster, because I'm going to be in his ear, pumping him up and making sure he's going as harder than he could ever go. That was my technique for seat racing. It's like, not that I was the fastest. It's like I'm trying to make people around me faster. You know, I'm trying to make Steve, you know, the last 500, you know, you gotta go. Like you gotta go and you gotta go fast, harder, and you need to get more and then more and then more and then more, and then you just have to finish the race.
So
Up,
So
up,
with
up,
that-
and then we're there, right? Like,
with that said, though, I mean, let's cookie sheets aside. Like, what do you think though is your edge? Like, what was your edge? Like, I think you've explained a lot of different scenarios as far as mindset, as far as approach to taking care of business on the water, and obviously, you know, the personal side. We'll get to obviously your real business side now later. But what do you think was, if there was a definitive edge? So we've had people on the show, and I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but we've had people on the show just be like, I was consistent, I was a great teammate, I, you know, I was humble. I don't know. There's all these different answers we've had. To your point, your boatmate Bo Hoopman was basically like, foul ball ahead. That was it. Foul ball had to be ahead. That was it. Like, that was his edge, right? It was something along those lines. But do you have a definitive like reflection on like, my edge was X, right? This was the things, and I think you've said some of it, but I wanted to clarify for the audience. Was it just simply like boatmate motivation? Was it, you know, the hype that you brought to get the boat excited? You know, we've talked about this a little bit with some other guys on this show, as far as like, you know, getting other people going as far as like an advantage. So yeah, I just didn't know if you had a specific thing like, hey, my edge was this, or was it motivation of like lack of, yeah.
It's a combination. It's a combination of things. I
Yeah.
could not pinpoint one thing. Grit is one thing. You know, going in day in and day out, ready to grind, no matter what. Motivational is it's one thing, but trying to see the boat from the outside and making the correct changes for the boat to go faster, and translating that into me yelling at them gibberish that they think they know what I'm saying, and they just go faster.
Sure.
Knowing that I have their backs no matter what, that I'm gonna go to battle for them, and I expect them to do the same thing for me. And you know, that's why, you know, I'm still friends. You know, I have a few long-term friends, but the majority of my long-term friends, fortunately or unfortunately, are rowers.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah.
I get bruises every time I see Dan because he's so friendly. I'm
Dude, you
scared.
play football. You play football. You should be able to take it.
I played ED at the end football.
Yeah. Oh man. I mean, it's very fun so far to have everybody on there. I'd have to say, Juice, your edge is nobody when you were in racing against you sucked, because when those seat races happened, or when you it was like in the 4 against you or in an 8 against you, you knew that you had to overcome your ability to make the experience positive for the other boat. Right? It's like when you would get seat raced out, or if I looked at a lineup and you were not in it. And I think about 2008, because I really do want to get to that, to your perspective, because truthfully, that selection is crazy. Steve literally pulled up empirical data that in that time of men's 8s rowing internationally was the fastest ever, right? And that's not to take away, like, we know it's an outdoor sport and there's conditions and all that stuff. But we had 2 8s at that time in selection before you guys went to Lucerne that were consistently going sub 4 minutes for 1,500 meters, right? I think there's like 5:54s in there, 5:55s, very regularly 5:57s. This is in Princeton, and this is before the team is named, right before Lucerne, so this is early summer. So again, you are a world-class oarsman. We're in these 2 8s trying to replicate the gold. We're breaking a lot of the records the 04 team set in practice, and you get into this 4 with Brett, you, Paul Tatey and David Banks, and you guys go to Lucerne, and you light it up, man. And you know, I love racing in all events. I really do. And I've gotten to race in almost every event at the World Championships. And there's something magical about a fast straight four. And I think you, to make it into the 8 or to make it into the national team. I mean, Luke tells this epic story of how I got myself back invited to the camp through the juggernaut or the gauntlet of the straight four. But I'd love to know what it was like for you guys, because I got removed from that experience. You know, I was lucky. Steve and I were lucky enough to kind of be in the 8, and you guys were making this really fast four, and it looked like we were going to have these two four, like this 4 and this 8, that were going to be both just churning and burning, and we were. And so just take us into the summer where we're in 8s that are going sub 4 minutes, and then you go to the 4 and you go to Lucerne, and the quad, right, with Scotty G, Sam Stitt, Jamie Schroeder, and Matt Hughes are fast too. You know, so they win, you get bronze. Like, tell us about that experience of like being the U.S. small boats that are showing international speed.
You know, Dan, this is literally 2008, so it's been
16 years.
Yeah, long time. Yeah, I never thought of myself as the big guy or the most experienced guy. So for me to go into Lucerne and coming in third was incredible. I remember I was with David Banks, and he was telling me, like, you know, if we get a medal, I'm gonna jump in the river. And he doesn't like water too much, but we won a medal and he had to jump in the river. I've never seen him move his arms that fast. But it was a great experience to do well in small boats. Obviously, there was a lot of pressure on us to keep moving the boat fast. So I think when we came back from Lucerne, and again, this is a while ago, we sort of kept the boat and kept the boat moving. And we had the 2K erg test, and everybody in the boat did well. And I think we had the time for that 4 was Lucerne. And when we got to the Olympics, we were kind of like, we didn't gain more speed. I don't know, like we were shocked that we were just not going as fast as we thought we could have gone. So obviously, you know, coming in, what is it, Steve? 8th? We came in 8th. You were in the 8. You got bronze, but we came in 8th, I believe. Not making the 8 final, it was a shock. You know, having Eric Murray and Hamish Bond, you know, they came in 7th. We came in 8th. So it was a shock to me not being able to come from 3rd. Seeing you guys win a medal, I mean, of course I was happy for you guys, but I was like, you know, I was in that mix. Things could have been different, you know. I wouldn't change anything. I mean, if I could look back, I don't think I would change anything. I mean, I didn't raise my hand and say, hey, I want to try out for the 8. In my mind, the straight 4 was the priority boat because we were going fast, and we just, you know, got a medal in Lucerne. And I really enjoy rowing with Paul, with Dave, and with Brett. And it was just, I guess it was not the time for us to make the 8 final. And of course, depression and all that stuff. You know, I missed a lot of weddings on that 2009 circuit of weddings because I was like, I don't want to, you know, I don't want to see anybody. But you know, it is what it is, and that's why I kept it going for another cycle, just because I was like, there's more for me to do. I remember I was living in New York, you know, with no money and nothing, and it was just, what am I doing here? So I had to go back to rowing.
Man, thanks. I mean, thanks for sharing that. It's very funny. You're not alone, right? It is a long time ago, and whether I'm being a good friend or a bad friend is, you know, we're kind of digging through this stuff because I think the Olympics comes around and there's feelings, and, you know, medal or no medal, we all go through it. It's that, you know, Luke articulates it really well when we talk about it, is that, you know, you look at the Olympics and it's such a thin line of success. to even to say you participated at that level to have a chance to make it, like the national team, whatever. It's just this arbitrary 4 years that we decided. But you do have to expand that bandwidth when you're in it. And winning the whole thing does matter, and medaling does matter, and it matters in sports. And I think we've diluted sports a little bit in trying to make it seem like it doesn't matter, and to me that kind of made the depression worse, where it's like, why does this matter so much if all of a sudden it doesn't matter? And Karin really articulated well. She quoted Cool Runnings, believe it or not, but she's like, if you're not good enough without the medal, right, then you're not good enough with it. And I think that part of this for me is I've been suffering with depression from getting a medal since then. Not feeling good enough and all those things. And what it came down to was like, this is why this show was existed, like Fast Friends, brother, is like, because you're fucking fast. There's a quack for you, Steve. And like, don't diminish the fact that Steve's, again, another quote from this group is, luck only matters, both bad and good, if you're good enough to win. And that straight four event, dude, is brutal.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just you, right? It wasn't just you. Like, all the boats that medaled at the previous World Championships were in that B final. And that's just because of the brutality of it. And you're a man in the arena. You're a man in the arena, right? And you went back into that arena. And I remember feeling the same way as you did after 04, being a spare, sitting in my parents' house, right? And living kind of in New York at the same time, having nothing and being like, I'm going back. And before you gloss over that, right? Before you gloss over that, the audience, I think, deserves to know, how did you get back? Right? Because to come from that, I don't want to see my friends get married, to no. No. I'm Giuseppe Lanzone. I'm a champion. I get up. I want to know how you got up, because when you came back, right? 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012, you had become the juggernaut. You had become the juggernaut, man. You had become the juggernaut, right? You were on the Olympic team. You were one seat on that team that was taken.
Yeah.
And you held that all the way to the games.
Yeah, Dan, to be quite honest with you, I agree and disagree about
Good.
about the Olympics, and just going to the Olympics and blah 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 and bullshit. I didn't go to the Olympics to participate.
Of course not.
I went to the Olympics to win, just like you, just like everybody else. We didn't go to try to make the A final. We went to win it. And if you come in third, second, or whatever, you didn't win it. You didn't win it. Looking back, it's like getting the fucking bronze medal at the Olympics would have been much better than I'm fucking getting that bronze medal at the Olympics. And it's not like I didn't want to go to my friends' weddings. It was just like I just felt out of place. Like, what am I doing here? I remember getting a call from Korsanowski, be like, "Hey, are you coming back to Princeton?" I was like, "Well, what do you mean?" Yeah, well, we're gonna start training again. So that's when I came back. I was a little out of shape. I got right back into shape. I started training again, and I started going hard again. And yeah, I mean, it was something that it took a while, and it took some thinking to do, just because I obviously I wanted to get back into it. I didn't have anything else going on. I tried my modeling career in New York City after being one of the faces of Ralph Lauren for the Olympics. But those kids come from all over the world to just model. They're all skinny. They all have their own look and whatever. And for me, was just not it. And so I came back from to New York. I came back to Princeton and just start grinding again. I remember what I was in the 4 with you, Steve, that year, 2009. We came in 13 that year. Horrible. I was with you, with Ken Winklevoss.
Yeah.
And who else?
Brett.
And Brett.
Dude,
you were
and we had
I was in Bow, right?
Yeah, yeah. And we had a great Lucerne, and
Yeah, we did. We had
Lucerne was
another great
peak.
Lucerne. Yeah.
We were like, whoa, we were third at Lucerne, and then
Yeah.
and then it was all downhill from there. Juice. Like
I don't know from there.
you know, like we've closed the books on Beijing, but I got to reopen it real quick because I got a fact for you that I think the audience needs to hear, right? Like, as hard as it was, like, do you realize, like, your semifinal was the A final? Like,
Yeah.
1, 2,
1, 2,
3
3.
in the semi. The next day was 1, 2, 3 in the A final.
Why do you have to bring that up, Steve?
Because
I
I'm saying
didn't even remember that. I just thought I was just
you
not good. But I remember
you
now that I
made,
checked.
but I'm saying, like, you made the A final, like, basically,
Yeah.
like, you know, you
1,
guys
2, 3,
did.
4. And if I remember correctly now, 1, 2, 3, 4, then some space, then 4, 5, 6. Yeah.
So, like, you know, I'm trying not to reopen it. I'm also trying to buck you up a little bit and say, like, you effectively were in the A final. Like,
But
Yeah.
but you guys knew going into it that that was going to be the A final.
Yeah.
Like,
And we didn't make it.
I love what
and
you
that's
just
why
said.
when we moved on, like that next year, like when you finally came back, I was looking to you. I'd never been in the straight four. I'd never been without a coxswain. Like, you know, here I am having done so well in the eights. I was like, I'm ready for this, and I got juice with me. You know,
We still made it into the C final. Horrible.
yeah, we were on the wrong side of a couple coin flips. Like, we were on the
Well,
wrong side of a coin flip in the
and we don't have to
heat,
get
and
we don't have
then
to get into it, but Juice, like,
Yeah.
I want to level set this with you, okay? Because being in it for a long time, having these conversations, being on the high performance committee side of things, like being on the administrative side of the Olympic movement, I want to just point out two things of your story that are really pertinent to the audience, to athletes that are training, to coaches that may be listening. You said that Jim Mitchell gave you everything to succeed. And we did not have that going into 2011. We don't have to go into the murky details of that. Like, that's a whole series of episodes. But part of my mission, and I feel like the mission of this group, is it does matter, Juice. It matters. Like I said, it matters to win, and it stings. And you can watch Michael Jordan's Save the Last Dance, and they talk about everything, and what he says towards the end of his interview is, I wish they would have let us go for 7 championships, right? Like, here's Michael Jordan feeling the same way. So whether we won $1 million or lost $1 million, when you're at the top of the sport, it is special. And it's because the people that go to the win make it so special. And you're one of those people. And we didn't have everything we needed to succeed in that era. You know, we have 7 medals to go for, and winning one. Like, that's why I'm really proud to be part of the U.S. team, especially a fan of this year's Olympic team, where they did it in the men's 8 and the men's 4. And, you know, I don't want to drag that out, but yeah, we are going to buck you up, and you should be pissed. We're all pissed. It should have been better for all of us for those years. You know, Luke should be pissed about 2004. Justin should be pissed about 01, and we all are. But this is a place where we're able to commiserate about it and make jokes.
But that said, Dan, and this is what this whole premise of this show is about, right? Which is like the 0.01% of people who get to go try this out, right? I really appreciate what you just said, Giuseppe, as far as like I didn't go to show up and put on a uniform, right? Like, I didn't go just to there's no participation fucking medal for me, right? Like, I could give a shit that I was there. What I remember is that I lost, and I personally have a personal feeling about that in the same way you do in different stages of my life and different things that have happened with my, you know, athletic business, whatever type career, is like you know, and this goes back to what you said at the beginning of the show. Like, you played to win, and if that fell short, then that was a problem. And I love that you articulated that as well as you did, man, because I think that that's what is really important that some people can get out of this show is like the mindset, because we're helping people understand also like what is the mindset of these people that you see on TV or you read about in the paper or whatever. Like, yeah, like I could go do that. It's like bullshit. So I think that that's where like I love that you articulated that, man, and just like how important it is like when you commit to then obviously to have the disappointment because it's a passion that you're committing to in a very extreme way. But I love that you articulated, man, how like no, like it I didn't go there for what the outcome was, right? Like, so I think that that's really important. One
I
question
mean,
I do
we weren't wrong for the U.S. and the U.S. expected to win.
exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
It
that's
matters.
we
It
were
matters.
expected to win. You know,
Yeah.
I see countries like Peru. You know, Peru goes and they try to do their best possible, and that's great
Right.
for them. But we don't go to the Olympics to try to do the best possible. We
Yeah.
went to win every single
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. And I love that you articulated that, man. Um, yeah, Dan, where do you want to take it from here? I know we have like the next cycle. Obviously, we can talk about. I would love to kind of dig into the now, and I'd love to just kind of freeform it, Dan, if you want.
Yeah, I mean, Juice, it's kind of your call. Like this is you've been as captivating as I knew you would be. And right. And I love that
Yeah,
you
I'm loving
like
this conversation, man.
yeah, and I think it's important, like to where we've kind of finished off is like I agree and disagree with you. And that is so welcome here. That is so welcome here. Like I'm so glad you disagree with me because I agree and disagree with you too. Is that winning does matter, but not at the cost of prolonged feeling shitty about doing something great, right? Failing at something great, being the person in the arena is not equal, but is worthy. Like the stuff that you went to. And so, like, I think going in through 2012 is we can get into it. It would be fun. You were a juggernaut. You know, you made the 8. It's up to you if you want to talk about that. But at the same time, like, what I think is most captivating about you is you more than most took all of the lessons that rowing taught you and that you taught rowing, and you're still applying that mindset to today, right? That champion mindset of who you were after '08, right? Took you to 12, made you a 2-time Olympian. And I'm kind of with you, Justin, is like, it's free form. And but juice personifies the mindset, right? That high improving, high performance mindset where you just take the skills from the failures you had in the past and you apply them to successes and wins in the future. So I'd love for you to talk to us about what kind of wins you're doing right now, if that's cool
Yeah,
with the rest of the group.
that's
We
fine.
can do that. We can do that, or we can talk about 2012 because
So yeah, I want to do just put a capstone though on 12, right? I think that it's important. Like you made the 8. Like, I think that I think it'd be a disservice to your teammates to just glaze over like the other 8 guys that were in that boat. Candidly, that were in the A final, missed a medal by 1 place, if I'm correct.
yes.
And
Thanks for reminding me.
no, I actually just rewatched that race. There was a reason I watched it for somebody else. I think that was on the show. It was a really tight race, right? So, I would love to just understand though, like, hey, was that it? Like for your national team? Like, I don't know the exact timeline of when you're like, all right, like I've done 2 Olympics or kind of where it went from there. And then, and then we'll talk about today. But I think it's important, as a teammate, like, hey, we're you know, just, just so the audience knows, Dan Walsh just texted all of us that he broke his chair.
I can go through
Yeah.
through so many thoughts and feelings because 2012
Yeah.
is a little bit of pressure,
Okay, sure.
a lot more frustrating. We can start back in 2011. I actually qualified as straight forward to go to the Olympics.
Okay. Yeah.
And then
So start there.
I got cut from the 4 in 2012, and I was the last 2 people that got shipped to 8 training camp. And then we had to make the 8, and then we had to go qualify the 8 in Lucerne. And so I qualified 3 boats for the Olympics, one in 2008 and in 2007, and then twice in 2011 and 2012. You know, I've had, and I haven't talked about, because I don't like to put excuses on my results. That's the last
Sure.
thing I do. But I guess since we're in this podcast, and I've been talking to Dan about this, and I'm excited for Dan, I'll share with you guys too. And to be quite honest, the first time that I shared this, what I'm about to tell you, was with Matt Schnobrick a few weeks ago when he was at my house. Was that I strongly believe that our boat in 2012 should have Mettle. One, I strongly believe that because of the equipment that we were using, we did not Mettle. And again, this is many years past. I still don't believe in excuses, but if I have to think back and do something different for my own future, would be that we were rowing with those skinny oars, skinny handles from, I think, Concept 2. And all the time trials, all the really good times, all the fast times that we were putting on, our heat in London was all in the tailwind, and those things really snapped out and really went fast, and we were cooking it, beating Australia, beating everybody, and not thinking about anything. Well, guess what? We had a headwind in the final at the Olympics games in Eton. And right off the start, you can see the race, we're a length behind right off the start. Not because we were not trying, not because we were slow, but because those oars, in my opinion, bended too much. And everybody had the regular oars, I think, or were rowing differently than us. Those shafts bended too much, and we never got to really let the shaft unfold and really send the boat. So by the time we got going, into the 500 meter, into the first 500, we were a length behind. You can see that in the video. And then we just worked our way back, and we ended up coming in 4th. I think I've seen the race once in my life before, and that was it, a long time ago. But that's the feeling that I had of that race, that all the training that we did and everything, the great times that we were putting in practice, our heat where everything was fast, everything was clicking, we were like on point. And then the finals came, and we had a headwind, and we got punched in the face right off the start, and we can never recover. The 8th race is too fast to, if you're not there at the start, you're not going to be there at the finish. And that's what happened to us exactly. We were in lane 4, I believe, lane 3, whatever, and we were a length back, and we could never recover. So that's the story that I've only really have talked to Matt Schnobrick a few weeks back when he was here, because it's something that it's always in my mind. I never like to talk about it. We came in 4th because we were not fast enough. But if you can put an excuse or learning something, it's like, we should have done pieces starts into a headwind with a skinny oars, and compared to another boat that was not rowing with skinny oars, rather than going to the Olympics and having that experience there. Who knows if we would have won or not if we had regular oars. But looking back, that's something that I would try to pinpoint on something that we could have, should have, would have done differently.
And that, Juice, that's amazing. And like, look, I go through a lot of the same stuff about Beijing. Like, I go through the same stuff about being an alternate. I go through almost every world championships in my mind. I think unless you don't win, and you go there to win, and you show the potential to win. I've even talked to Adam Creek about this, because even though they won in 08, they did not win in 04 as the favorites, and that happens. It's like, you think about the 08 straight 4 that you were in, the 3 medalists from the previous world championships didn't make the final. If we cannot be critical, from the people to the equipment to anything that comes to a loss, right? And have what you're experiencing is what's called confirmation bias, where if all things are equal and I've busted my ass and I've done everything right, then in theory, meritocracy should show that I deserve to win. And that's the thing about rowing that's just so messy, is that there's so many variables. There's so many variables that have to click continually. And at that regatta that comes every 4 years, that really only, even though the Olympics is 2 weeks, the regatta is only a week, right? And it does seem from the outside that there's a lot of times where there is this, again, this manifest destiny where there are all these crews that it just goes right for them every step of the way. But I think that's the key, right? That is what, to Steve's point, and I think that's to the luck of sport, right? Where you don't necessarily need good luck, but you sure shit don't need bad luck, you know? And I think that's, to me, that's like why being in the arena is so epic in its own, is because only one cohort can win each time. That's it. Right. And that 0.0001% and being on the like, because from 2011, from my experience, right, is I feel like I should have been in that boat. And US rowing, and the system that we were in, and having to live in Orinda for 4 months with paying for our own food and our own housing, and not being at the training center where you guys coming up fresh compared to what we were after doing selection for 2 months straight. It almost killed me. I literally turned my guts inside out just to stay competitive in that camp. Whereas if we stayed in Chula, where at 33 years old, we had medical care and we had, food, and we had, so like, my confirmation bias goes not even to the games. And I will fully admit I got sick. Right. And I will take responsibility for, like, I was in that 8 that didn't qualify in 11. Right. So I feel you, man. As I'm trying to say is, like, I constantly, to my own detriment, have that confirmation bias. If I would have stayed in Chula Vista, what would have happened? And I play the what if game. And the only thing that's helped me with it is, one, talking about it amongst people that understand. I can't talk about it with anyone outside of this group because it matters. But two is, what's that?
Nobody really understands.
No, but two is being critical about it, right? Not emotional about it anymore, but critical about it. And I think that's not an excuse, Juice. That's what a high performing mind does, is say, if I look at all the variables and these variables were different for us, and knowing that at the Olympic level, to get to the final is one more click on the exponential curve. Right. And to get to the medals is one more click on the exponential curve. And to win it all means that you're the tippity top of the exponential curve in all things of that day, of that week, of that moment, of that training cycle, etc. Hell yeah, dude. Make some critical thoughts. Find reasons why it wasn't you on that day. I think that's healthy. And then our job is to put that out there and talk about it, so people don't mess up that opportunity for athletes again. Right? Because US rowing's fine, the IOC is fine, the administrations are fine. The athletes are suffering from that. Right? And you don't deserve to suffer for wanting to be critical. Because that's actually what helps improvement, is when we can take that emotional confirmation bias and say, I just feel like it wasn't me. It wasn't my fault. I felt like I did everything right. It's not fair. And that's what I think young kids have to understand too about sports. It's not fair. It's not fair. It could all blow up on the last stroke. I mean, I think about that women's quad race came down to the last stroke, right? Winning the race up into the last stroke. So I love what you're saying, man. And I don't think you're making excuses. I think the reality is, like, yeah, weren't good enough in that moment.
Yeah.
That sucks.
We weren't, and that's why I honestly, I started making that explanation. I don't want to call it excuse, that explanation, because I need to at least put it out there that it's something that I had in my mind for the last 12 years that I haven't had the chance to just even explain it. Hey, what happened? Why didn't you guys win? You guys were supposed to win. You guys won your heat. You come in fourth. That's bullshit. You know, and I even remember seeing the Canadian boat not do good in their heat, but they actually changed the way they rode in the final, and it even came, you know, I think they came in second.
You know,
Yeah.
that final, just for the audience and just to remind everyone here, that was probably the tightest Olympic final ever. I'm just going to say it, ever. 3 seconds from first to sixth. Like when has that ever happened in the men's 8 other than that we remember personally? 3 seconds separating first to sixth. That doesn't happen in rowing. You know,
but guess what,
with,
Steve? It doesn't matter. We still
it
didn't
doesn't
win.
it doesn't. You know what Dan said, and just to be clear, right, like what I've said to Dan, where, you know, you talk about luck, right? Like, for luck to play a factor, you have to be good enough to win, right? To say we had bad luck, like the starting point is we were good enough to win, and then it came down to, you know, bad luck.
Yeah.
And, you know, and from my end, you know, damn straight you better have been good enough to win if I wasn't going to be in the boat. Like, you know,
That's the other thing. That's the other thing. Like, all the people that did not make the boat is like, at least if you're not gonna be in the boat, you got cut out because of people that won the fucking Olympics, not coming fourth.
yeah. I mean, you
But
guys,
I think it's just as important what you didn't say as what you did say, right? So what the takeaway for me is you've had time, you've had clarity, you've rolled it around in your mind for years and years and years, and you keep coming to the same conclusion, which is wasn't us. And that's like such a profound trust that you have in your teammates, that after all of this, the only thing you can think of that could possibly explain how that final unfolded was the equipment, because you have zero doubt and 100% faith and trust in all the guys you were rowing with. So like that's the unsaid part. That's the takeaway for me, because you're like, well, there's just no way. There's no way. And so you can't, you know, you have that level of trust amongst those guys. I think I mean, it's incredible. You have to have that, you know, that's what everybody dreams about when they talk about team. And so, you know, that's the fascinating part for me, is that you have rolled it around. You've ruled out completely that it was the guys. You know what you guys were capable of. You know who all these guys are, what they, you know, who they are, what they represent. The fact the willingness that they would go to the end of the earth to win a race the same way you would. So that has led you to, well, there are some untested elements, and part of that was equipment. So that's not, in my mind, that's not an excuse. That's sort of like, okay, we're kind of going through the checklist of things here, and this is the one possibility that still exists, that's out there, that's a question mark.
That's an eloquent way to put it. I haven't voiced myself out because I don't like to put excuses out there. And
Sure.
yeah, we can talk about it. It's not an excuse, it's an explanation or whatever, but it's like, at the end of the day, it was lack of preparation on that one aspect of that's the skinny oars that we've never rowed with before, bent too much. Period.
But that's such a thing in sports, right? Like, you want to have the most cutting edge technology to your advantage, but at the same time, if it's too much of an unknown, is that the place to test it, right? And I think there's a lot. Like, we tested a whole new system in 11. We tested a whole new coach in 11. We changed the training center, 3 times in 11. Like, we did have Mike coaching that 8, but he was also coaching Cal. It wasn't like there's so many things that we can look at that weren't tested. I think you can go back to 2008 and say the same thing. We trained in Clemson, which was untested. So to me, because it's so emotional, because winning matters so much,
Yeah.
right? Winning matters so much. And so much of your self-worth is wrapped into it, because to get to that level, you had to overcome so many losses by winning. Right? You don't get into an Olympic class boat by losing a lot of seat races, right? You don't get to an Olympic class boat by losing a lot of ergs. You don't get to Olympic class boat by losing a lot of practices. You do a lot of winning, so you know you're capable of it. But I think, to me, why I love this show is because we're able to talk freely amongst the people in the arena. Is you're now free to say, I think this could have been done better. And there's nothing we can change about it. So this isn't like trying to have a pity party of, oh, well, if I didn't get sick, we would have been faster. I'm going to always think that. But what it's good to know is, like, how do we make a system better? We make a system better by being critical of its failures. And at the Olympic level, one failure can be catastrophic to the win, because the margin of execution is so finite at the Olympic level. If you are in a lane that has a puff of wind, or if you are in the starting blocks in track and field and there's one screw loose on your starting block, right? If you are a gymnast and you have your foot, like, I think that's the part for the audience to really understand, is that you want to talk about being at the razor's edge of life, where a small mistake is magnified. That's what it's like. But to have the courage to risk it, I'll never, never, ever, ever let an Olympian feel bad about that again. Never in my life. Never am I going to let the person in the arena feel like that they're not allowed to be critical of it. Everyone else can be critical of it. No. If they can all be critical of your loss, then you get to be critical of it. And if you think it's yours as a two-time Olympian, a multiple medalist at Lucerne, right? The legacy that you had. Yeah, I want to know your opinion on why you think that 8 lost, and I think it matters. And then just nice to have a place where we can talk about it, right? That matters. And that's awesome. I thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate you sharing that with us, because, I mean, Justin has the most fun job right now, is because we get to see how again, Juice, you're a fucking champion. You are a champion. And my definition of a champion is somebody who always gets up. So you take those 2 licks from 08 and 12, and I know who you are, but Justin, I want you to figure out who Juice is now.
Oh, yes. I mean, thank you for sharing that. And so while we're talking about margins, and I think that we've said it on this, the past few episodes with other folks, is like, rowers, have this mentality that they like to do really hard things. So you decided to go into the restaurant business, which is probably the toughest business to be successful at. It's actually very, very well documented that it's a margin-based business that I actually have experience working in from a corporate perspective, that is extremely competitive. So talk to us about where Juice transitions from oarsman to businessman, entrepreneur, to basically to the restaurant business, right? Because like the restaurant business is tough, right? Like the restaurant business is a fucking grind. But there's tremendous community. There's, just like rowing, right? There's tremendous, teamwork that's involved. Like, so I'd love to just start with how'd you get in the restaurant business? Let's just start there. How did you say I'm gonna go, and I believe your brother is a partner with you, correct?
Yeah.
Hence the name Peruvian Brothers. But how did you transition into that? Give us the premise, if you can give me the elevator pitch of what is your business, and then what are some of the lessons and mindset that you've translated from elite level oarsman to elite level entrepreneur in a highly competitive DC market for the food and beverage industry. Tell us about where you're at now. like, because I think that's another really fascinating story where people, we've had a lot of people talk about the rowing journey. We haven't had a ton of people talk to us about the now and how that's translated through, man. So yeah, would
Well,
love to
let
hear
me
about that. I'm fascinated by it.
let me start by stepping one step back. I
Okay.
came back from the Olympics not with a lot of money, not with much, and I
Sure.
wanted to coach at Georgetown. So I ended up being
Okay.
the freshman coach at Georgetown. Waking up at 5 in the morning, driving into DC, coaching, coming back, driving back, coaching in the afternoon. I believe that was not a good paying job. Not like the Ivy League schools where you have 6 digits or whatever. This was
Mm-hmm.
paying pennies on the dollars. Plus the recruiting was really hard. Anyway, but my whole thing was like I wanted to teach the stuff that I learned back to somebody else. So I started coaching, and then I remember my brother came back. He's a yachts captain in the Mediterranean, and we wanted to start something together. It was a little lounge, a bar, something cool. And my mother was like, "How about a food truck?" I was like, "Okay, it's not a food truck sounds good." What about the concept? We miss Peruvian food. We thought about salads and things like that to stay healthy, but then we were like, all right, let's do something that we're passionate about. So we started Peruvian Brothers #1. So for the first 4 years, I was coaching and running Peruvian Brothers completely. So I would wake up at 5 in the morning, go to practice from 6 to 8, drive back to Virginia, grab the food truck, back down to DC, find parking, sell food till like 2, 2:30, 3 o'clock, be back, take everything out of the food truck, clean the food truck, come back into DC and coach again. I did that for 4 years, and also it's humbling coming back from the Olympics, being the face of Ralph Lauren, meeting with Joe Biden for Hispanic Heritage Month, being an Olympian, and all of a sudden you're part of the food truck industry and you're literally a cashier at a food truck. So you learn to be humble from the very beginning and learning from washing dishes to being a cashier to helping cook the food. And it was just my brother and I just pretty much doing everything. From the first year, we were successful. We were selling out all the time. So we got the second food truck. And then by I think the fourth year, we bought the third food truck and moved into our own catering kitchen. By that time, I was a head coach at Georgetown University. We ended up winning their first ever lightweight Cox 4 national championship. So at that point, it was my turning point to be like, I got the monkey out of my back. I'm not having nightmares about the Olympics anymore. I'm not thinking about how could have, should have, would have in the Olympics. I'm not thinking like I'm not being depressed about not winning the Olympics. I finally won the Cox 4 for the lightweight teams. Granted, it's not the varsity 8. It's not the freshman 8. It's the lightweight Cox 4. So it's the people that didn't make it into the lightweight 8 made it into a lightweight 4 because we weren't fast enough to make it into the lightweight 8. But to make a long story short, we won something. We won a national championship. We won something at its highest level of the boat. So for me, that was good enough to be like, I'm done with rowing. I've coached rowing. I've coached kids. Everything I knew how to do it. I grabbed them from their freshman year. 4 years later, they won a national championship. I said, I'm done. I can let that rest. Meantime, I had 3 food trucks. I had a catering kitchen. We were doing catering. We were running 3 food trucks at the same time. Years go by. We ended up getting recommended by the U.S., the Peruvian embassy here in Washington D.C. to open at the first ever Latin market in Washington D.C. So we ended up opening our first restaurant on February 1st of 2020. Probably the worst time for restaurant. Before the restaurants, we never took a loan. Everything that all the food trucks and everything, it was our own money that we kept turning into more food trucks. But for the restaurant, we had to get a loan, we had over 2,000 people for a grand opening, and a month later, the streets were completely empty. Not only that, the food trucks were not going out because there was nobody in any building. Everybody in the restaurant was not there, so we had to pivot and start selling food to construction workers that were still having to go to work because that part of the economy never stopped. So instead of selling like our high end not free range chicken with high end sides for $14, all of a sudden we're like, okay, well I'll sell it to you for $10, but make sure you come here and eat here. In the meantime, there's a lot of donations for first responders. So of course I started hitting out my rowing friends. I was like, hey, I'm doing this. You want to donate? And there were some good people that donated some money, some customers that donated money. We ended up partnering it up with World Central Kitchen and Jose Andres from World Central Kitchen. And they started giving us money to be able to donate food. And we ended up opening another small restaurant that was an outdoor park that was just sitting empty that we went over and took over it. So we went from not taking the food trucks out to now 2 restaurants that were just nickel and diming everybody to try to get a little bit of money and a little bit of sales here and there. We ended up buying alpacas so we could, like, the small caterings for like 10 people, 8 people that people were asking us for that we usually don't take. We wouldn't take it because they're too small. We would take anything. And then we could offer them alpacas for an extra $500. And why not bring alpacas to your kid's 5th birthday? They haven't been outside their house, for a year and a half. Alpacas would be something for them to like see outside. So and because of that small place that we opened on April of 2020, because opening one place during the pandemic was not enough for us. We like the pain.
We like the pain.
Yeah.
Rowers like our things.
Yeah. Amazon ended up offering us this other location that is much bigger. It's 2,000 square feet. It's our own restaurant on the bottom level of Amazon HQ2, which it was great. So right now, over 11 years into Peruvian Brothers, we have 4 food trucks. We have 2 restaurants, one in Washington, D.C. in Latin Market that is a very up and coming area, and the other one at the bottom level of Amazon HQ2. So for us to have Peru and Amazon in the same press release is huge. Not only that, we do catering anywhere from private catering to weddings to corporate level caterings, and then we also are doing a lot of government contracts with the U.S. Capitol, the FBI, the NGA, National Geospace Agency, FDA, Fort Belvoir, and we're also trying to just keep adding to our repertoire of things. We're brand ambassadors for avocados from Peru. We're brand ambassador for the Peru brand. And for me, having Peruvian Brothers now after 11 years of being part of it, it's like, I'm originally from Peru. If anybody asks me, I am Peruvian. I'm not American. I'm not from the US. I'm not from McLean. I'm from my small town in Peru. But I never got to represent them. I never got to row for Peru. I never had to put my jersey on, my Peruvian jersey on, and row for Peru. Rowing for the U.S. is all I had. It's what I gave my heart to, my brain to. Everything that I had was for the U.S. But now that I'm growing out of it, I get a special joy to be able to represent Peru in the gastronomy world, where the ambassador of Peru have called us gastro diplomats. We are representing Peru in with the gastronomy, and whenever we have events, anniversaries or Independence Day parties, like we throw the house out the window. We have alpacas outside. We have live music. We have live performance. We have pisco tastings. We have cajon, which is a Peruvian instrument, workshop for kids to learn. So my idea right now is, after 11 years, is how do I make Peruvian food, fast casual Peruvian food, more of like an everyday thing, like how you think about pizza or tacos or Thai food or Chinese food. I want you to think about Peruvian food as your go-to ordering food for any day of the week, and that's what we're trying to accomplish nowadays. Just make it into a more of a mainstream. And like, and I'm not competing against other Peruvian restaurants. I'm competing against other cuisines. I'm competing against the French cuisine, the Mexican cuisine, the Chinese foods. I'm competing against those rather than competing against my own.
Yeah, it's fantastic, and congratulations on the scaling of the business again. The restaurant business is not an easy business, especially if you're starting it during COVID. So well done there. I mean, you answered my question. I wanted to make sure the alpacas were still around. Sounds like they are. I don't know where they live, but
Well,
that's
the alpacas are at my house right now, and we used to take them out ourselves. I used to take them out myself
okay.
to different caterings, but right now that we are so busy with many things that we hire the alpacas from somebody else. So
Perfect.
the alpacas are just hanging out we live in a little farm out here in Great Falls, but
Okay.
the alpacas live here, and they take care of themselves. But we hire somebody else's alpacas now because that's what they do for a living.
So just, obviously you have a scaled business. So yeah, I think the authenticity to the Peruvian culture and cuisine, I think is really impressive, right? And I think that it's, and the reason I'm speaking from a point of reference, it's, and I've seen this across, 9-figure, multi-billion-dollar restaurant industry clients, where it's really easy to unauthenticate in chasing a margin versus stay in your lane to grow, seed, build a scaled audience within your cuisine, right? And so I commend you on that. I think that the question I guess I have is, just as you and your brother approach the business, and obviously everything we've talked about, which by the way, this has been an amazing conversation, Giuseppe. Is just, what do you look for? You have a scale business. You have a lot of people that you have to share the responsibility with to help you be successful, which is a little different than, controlling your own destiny and writing your own narrative when you're a rower. Even though you have a team, you obviously, there's some data that can show, okay, I'm faster than this guy. I should be doing this. We've talked about this a lot on the show. Um, what do you look for when you try to find the right fit for the culture of your business with the culture of the Giuseppe Lanzone, business mind, rowing mindset? How do you kind of groom your call them athletes slash partners in the business, when you're looking to bring somebody on, or say, hey, I want you to be the GM of this location, I want you to run this food truck like it's your own, I want you to take care, and every ingredient we put in, if it's a shitty looking tomato, we're not cutting it, we're not using it, whatever it may be. So I'd love to kind of understand how you impart that, because that's obviously, I think, one of your probably secret sauces to your business success, but I'd love to kind of hear how you translate that out.
You nailed it, Justin. I run Peruvian Brothers as a team.
Yeah.
We don't have employees. Everybody's part of the team here.
Mm-hmm.
If you come in and you're supposed to sweep the floor and you didn't sweep the floor, somebody else is gonna have to sweep the floor.
Yeah.
If you're closing and you didn't prep enough food, somebody else is gonna have to do your job. As far as managers, as far as operational managers, as far as chefs, I've never hired a manager.
Yep.
And I'm not going to hire a manager. And I tell it to every single person that comes in to work with us. My operational manager, my right-hand man, he came in to make sandwiches in the food truck. And I was like, dude, you're too good to make sandwiches in the food truck. Why aren't you the manager of the food truck? So he became the manager of the food truck. Hey man, you're just too good to be the manager of the food truck. Like, and this is the first person that I brought to my side of the business, the operational side. So right now I have a person that's been working with us for about 6-7 years that is started making sandwiches, and now he's running and he's making. We have a person that is a general manager for 2 of the restaurants that started making sandwiches in the first restaurant. I was like, well, you're really good at this. Why aren't you in charge of the front of the house? Why aren't you in charge of the front and the back of the house? Well, now you're the manager. Well, now you being the manager here is too easy. We had to open another restaurant so you can run both restaurants. The person running the food trucks, I'm like, you're good at running the food truck, but now you're gonna be also running our delivery routes. The person running my catering kitchen, she's in charge of A, Y, and Z. So we have a really good team that we've kept building over time. It hasn't happened right away, and I've had my tough parts of learning how to gouge the good people from the bad people, the people that are not good and good. And thankfully now we have a very, very good team that helps me with the bullshit that I don't see on people. I try to go see the positive on people,
Sure.
just like when I coach rowing,
Mhm.
just in life in general. And thankfully, I have people that are bigger assholes than me that be like, oh, that guy's full of shit. So we get to see that a little more often.
Right on. But dude, I think it's bringing us to our kind of closing question, and again, like, I can't overstate it enough. Like, I have a lot of respect for you, obviously, throughout your rowing career. Again, I was one of those guys in that Northeastern team when you came for an official visit. Was like, this guy's going to make us faster, and it didn't happen. All the way through you telling us literally, this journey that was the national team and your exploits with the U.S. Embassy and everything in between, to then running a successful fast casual business, which is, again, having worked in that, it's one of the most competitive categories within the food service industry. So yeah, a lot of kudos there, man, and I love your approach to the business. I'm gonna flip it over to Dan to kind of bring us home, but yeah, Giuseppe, like, freaking awesome story, man. I appreciate you taking the time and being really, really insightful and really, really transparent.
Thanks, Justin.
Yeah, man.
All right, brother, your torture is almost over.
I've actually enjoyed this, to be quite honest with you.
Thank you. So here's the final question. If you could go back and coach yourself, at what time in your life would it be, and what would you say?
It would probably be right after I got Male Athlete of the Year. Don't put your guard down and keep grinding more. Not grind the same, but keep grinding more. You have to keep growing. You can't just be big and just do what you have to do. You have to grow more. And I think I was doing that, but now I'm thinking that you're asking me this question, it's like, just like the rest of my life, we have to do more. You have to do more. If you want to be the best in the world, you're the best in the world because you do more. And obviously we were training, we were grinding, qualifying the boat for London, going faster, but focus more, grind more, rest more. So yeah, I mean, it's an open-ended answer to your question, because at the time of the time of training, it's not like I wasn't trying to train hard. It's not like I was trying to compete more. I was doing all that. Test your equipment more, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, no, it's a hard question to answer after 8 years, 7 years in the national team. It's hard to just go back and where could I have improved? 2009 run with Steve probably.
Thanks.
But no, just everything as a whole, just there's always times that you can just get a little bit better here and there, train more, party less, even though we didn't party that much. But things like that is like, that you look back and you're like, maybe if I had a different mindset, or, it's the things like that. I want to end it on a positive note. I don't want to go down the rabbit hole here. But it's things that you think about it now that you're older and hopefully wiser, that you didn't think back then, that you think it was normal back then, that you deserve it back then after training, you know, a whole month without, you know, doing anything, and you just want to just think back and be like, oh, maybe I could have done a little more rehab, or maybe I could have done an extra set of squats, or maybe I could have, you know, test the oars into the headwind, or maybe I could have, who knows? So I don't have a good answer to that question, other than I could have done more in any stage of my life.
I think that's a great answer. I think it's a great answer, and I think that getting to be your friend, and I'm very lucky that I make fast friends. Very lucky, very
Like-
lucky that you got to stay with me that day, and we became friends that day. And I think that's really beautiful to see that you're taking your advice and doing it now, right? You are doing more. You're a
Yeah.
beautiful husband, a beautiful father. You got baby number 2 coming. You got this incredible life, and you made time for us.
That's all for today's show. Fast Friends is a Metal Factory production. All opinions expressed are our own and those of our guests. If you like our show, follow along or subscribe with us wherever you get your content and podcasts. Thanks for listening.